Ow! Oh! Oh! God, that has been in my neck for a week. How does anybody deal with, like, crawling around? Like, why did no one help? But, like, camera lady, why didn't you help? Look at me.
I like watching you suffer.
Well, you know what else is akin to suffering? Playing Ju-on the Grudge on Nintendo Wii.
Ah yes, Ju-on the Grudge. I touched briefly on how much I admire this film in last year's Sadako vs Kayako Halloween video, but I didn't get to go into too much on the film or the Ju-on series as a whole due to, well, having to share screen time with fellow Yurei Sadako. So let's change that.
With Ju-on, there are now 12 films associated with the franchise. It all started with a short film, and then exploded in popularity with both V-Cinema and theatrical releases.
If you want to check out the series, start with Ju-on the Grudge. It's a non-linear horror film focusing on stories surrounding a group of characters, both past and present, who have interacted with a cursed house, grounds to the horrific murders of Kayako Saeki, son Toshio, and cat Ma by husband and father Takeo. Kayako, in extreme agony after her death, inflicts her grief and pain onto any who trespass, stalking with her signature death rattle.
The Kayako storyline came to a head in Ju-on the Grudge 2, but of course that wasn't the end of it. There was an Americanized remake known as The Grudge, and to be honest with you, it's actually kind of good. It has a great sense of consistency with the original films due to a shared director, as well as a shared cast in some cases, particularly the actress playing Kayako. And, you know, I haven't really got much to complain about it. Of course though, with all this success, both domestically in Japan and overseas, merchandising was going to be inevitable. And as a result, in 2009, onto the Nintendo Wii crawled Ju-on the Grudge.
First thing to mention, this particular title does not want us referring to it as a game. Instead, it wants to be known as a haunted house simulator.
Hey, at least it's a half-honest walking simulator.
After selecting your gender and star sign, features which do God knows what, you, as the player, are shown into the game. And much like the Japanese Ju-on titles, it is broken up into short episodes that can each take up to about 15 minutes to get through.
At least in theory, they take 15 minutes. But more on that later.
The first episode follows Erica, who is chasing after the family dog Ivy that has just decided to run off into an abandoned factory. Realizing she can't get out, Erica decides to push through and... oof, this is painfully awkward. Movement is beyond unnatural and everything feels incredibly jerky.
So how would you expect this title to control? With the remote here to act like a pointer and an analog stick on the nunchuck, you know, to guide you around, right? Wrong. What we're actually going to do is get rid of this and just use this, using the B button to walk forward and the pointer to kind of vaguely point you where you want to go.
Calling it uncomfortable and awkward is an understatement, and it gets worse with how bad the game's motion detection is. Getting around this muddy, bland environment is awful enough, but then of course there's no escaping how poorly the game performs and looks. Frame rate drops are a constant issue, and to call the graphics here low end would be an understatement. It's well established that the Wii wasn't the most powerful console of all time, but Christ alive, we knew that it was 1,000 times more capable than this. Also, why is everything so beyond dark? I swear I have brightness turned all the way up. This is just how it is.
Going back to the topic of the Ju-on series, the films tend to use suspense and anticipation as the driving source of the horror, as well as a great way to keep you glued to the characters' stories on screen. So, how did the developers of this title translate that art of constant build-up into the video game?
Jump scares. They reduced nearly everything to jump scares. By the way, that grab there, yeah, that was the first 5-ish minutes of the level. The films don't show Kayako much at all, saving her reveal or presence for the payoff, or as a subtle tease, to set the mood. But here, the game already blew its load, so from here on out, it just makes, stuff fall about, shake, and generally be obnoxious. Christ, let's just get to the elevator and the end of the stage so we can get to the second episode, seen through the eyes of Miki.
I'll give it one thing. A lot of the scares in this next level are straight from the source films. I understand where the developers were going from with this, but it's just still weird, to have the payoff with no foreplay.
Miki, a mother who was recently hospitalized after moving homes, wakes up late at night in her hospital bed. Of course, what follows is her being haunted and chased around the hospital's various facilities. One of the more notable things here is that Toshio plays a much more prominent role in the scares this time, taking the spotlight away from Kayako until the near end of the level.
Well, unless you're exploring heavily, and I mean scouring every level from top to bottom, but I'll touch on that again in a minute.
The level ends on the roof of the hospital, and it has one neat effect with a colour changing blanket. Oh, and then just drops off rather anticlimactically onto the concrete. Level 3 then, and this is where the game went from a mundane, boring, cheap experience to one of the most frustrating titles I have had to review.
Love them or hate them, the Wii's trademark gimmick was motion control. And in some games, it's actually implemented quite well and actually adds to the experience. And then there's garbage like this, where they straight up don't work.
In the third stage, Ken, a delivery driver making a last late night route, stops at what appears to be a derelict apartment building to drop off his final package. Of course, the place is completely derelict, creepy, and has Kayako in one of her better and more original appearances, crawling right out of a box. It's probably the shortest level of the lot, but easily the most bullshit. Firstly, it outright hides a story essential item on you, leaving you fumbling until you accidentally find it.
But secondly, it doesn't function.
After being stuffed into a cupboard, stalked by bloody handprints, and spooked by ghostly figures, Ken makes his final run, and the motion controls for the QTE fail spectacularly. And then they fail again. And again. And again! For whatever reason, it sucks at detecting the up motion, and I'm far from the only one with this issue. In frustration, I went online and found this old thread on the matter.
From what I could tell, my glitch was being caused by one of two things. Scenario 1, it was because I'm using this Wii remote with Wii Motion Plus built into it. So, I switched remotes. I went to this regular one. And wouldn't you know it, the problem persisted. So, with that in mind, I had to go to the second method.
The second seemed like a long shot, but I figured it was worth a try. Hidden in all of the levels are special items, fragments of objects key to the center of the Saiki murders. Using a guide, I replayed levels 1 and 2, being sure to get every single piece and complete the secondary objective. Finally, after a good 45 minutes of scavenging thanks to a scare in level 2 refusing to trigger until I reloaded the bloody game, I went back to the Ken episode, being sure to get all the items. I'll be honest, it felt very much like busy work and padding. Well, maybe barring this one.
Was that supposed to be intimidating? Because the first time I saw that, I laughed so loudly my dog barked.
Okay, take 6. Let's go. I'm feeling it. Son of a bitch. I didn't know what to do, so out of frustration and pure unbridled stubbornness, I threw myself at the level time and time again. Oh, and of course, because this is a terrible game, there are no checkpoints for each event, so a game over means a total level restart.
And as I mentioned earlier, levels are about 15 minutes long, so at least there isn't a huge amount of time between attempts. Plus, on a really good note, I only had to pick the items up once. Once I'd gotten them, I didn't have to go get them again. Look, the game is still, a god-awful, horrific mess, but it's got just a little tiny bit of consideration. Just a little bit.
On the 7th attempt, I tried something different. Literally planting my Wii remote straight up on my desk. And? Well, I'll be damned, it works. The level ends, of course, with Ken being killed off anyway, making the whole escape routine completely pointless, but hey, I can go to level 4 now.
Seriously, the only way to make, this up motion work is to do this. Yeah, a full, solid 90 up in the air. No other motion had this issue. Left, right, down, all work fine. And up will work when it's combined with another direction. It's exclusively when the QTE makes you do the up motion.
Chapter 4 is where the game's wasted potential shows the strongest. This time we play as Hero, a middle-aged security guard working the night shift at a television station. Weirdly enough, it tries to replicate the weird security tape scene from Ju-on the Grudge, but, well, it's set in the wrong place. What we get instead are some rather bland corridors, save for one moment that was kind of cool. Dotted around are these mannequins, and you'd think or expect there to be something interesting done with them. Of course, no, this title is a bigger disappointment than the How I Met Your Mother finale, but once, and only once, it does have a little attempt that I like just a small bit. In one of the rooms, there's a mannequin wearing a similar white dress to the one adorned by Kayako, and when you go to leave the room... It's super easy to predict, but it's at least a half-decent original spook. This episode ends with Kayako madly chasing our old pal all the way from the end of the level back to the very beginning, before claiming yet another victim.
See, at this point, every sane person would be done. You've done all 4 levels, you're out. Or are you? See, Kayako's curse is only triggered on somebody when they enter her house.
But unless you get all of the items in all 4 stages, you aren't going to get to play the final episode, which, is the Psyche house itself. Returning home after her close brush back at the factory, Erica finds herself in the midst of the curse. Of course, home just so happens to be, in the most obvious plot twist, the Psyche house, like I said 20 seconds ago. Everyone is related, Kayako is just being Kayako, and this final level, while, fun to see and explore this infamous location, is just as busted and broken as the 3rd, thanks to yet again, the damn bug with the up motion.
Cats killed me 4 times. Cats.
And of course, there's a second scene with the same up motion bug shortly after. Bloody hell. It took me an hour of attempting, failing, and fumbling to get through this level. Half the problem is the buggy motion, but the other half is that for the first time, the game is stingy on resources. See, to try and ramp up what little tension there is, the game's torch uses batteries that the player must find through the levels. In every other level, there's an overabundance of the bloody things, but in the finale you get only one extra battery. And of course, every door is a mess of fumbling to find the sweet spot to be able to open it, which wastes a ton of time and battery power. Oh, and if you're wondering what happens when you run out of batteries... Because, yeah, to be fair, fumbling around in the dark in this already pitch black game does actually sound like a horrible waste of time.
But with enough perseverance, I got to the end. And of course, it's just as mediocre as the rest of the game.
Using the bark of Ivy the dog to load to the front door, Kayako finally gives in and goes all out, throwing an insane hairball down the stairs and dragging Erica into the attic to be with her. The final cutscene shows the house covered in scratches, as if something, or someone, was dragged through it. And then, finally... Wait, seriously? This is just a bootleg half-ass version of Dawn the Grudge's ending, but without Takeo, and the character becoming the new Kayako. Seriously, what a freaking jip!
And of course, to add insult to injury, this is one of the rarest titles on the Wii. On average, if you're considering picking it up for whatever reason, you can expect to pay about $40-ish. But unless you're a hardcore Wii collector or a big fan of Ju-On, simply don't recommend it. It's just an infuriating experience from start to finish. And I need to catch a break. This has been, what, 3 Halloweens in a row that I've played garbage? Come on. And speaking of catching a break, you. Yeah, I don't think I didn't see you. I have paid you once again to use your basement. You are the worst landlady I have ever had to deal with. This isn't... Again? Really?